Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today at our How to Write a Successful Test Plan TEAMER webinar. My name is Aaron Franco. I work with Pacific Ocean Energy Trust, which administers the TEAMER program. And I am glad to have you all here with us today. Before we get started, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping for TEAMER news and information. First of all, a reminder that RFTS 16 applications will be due June 6th, Friday. We'll be accepting those through the end of the day. So if you want to be considered for the 16th round of funding or technical support, get those applications I's dotted, T's crossed, and submitted by June 6th. If you won't be ready, don't worry. RFTS 17 will be accepting through October 3rd. One other bit of news, if you like webinars, and it seems like we have some people here who may, we have a facility showcase webinar scheduled for June 11th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. That will let you learn about some of the capabilities of our facilities in case you're looking for support or just looking to learn more about the program. So join us then. More information will be available on our website, teamer-us.org, in the near future. With that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rob Cavagnaro, who will be presenting today's webinar. He is a member of the technical board for TEAMER since the program's inception, and is a mechanical engineer with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. He has reviewed a lot of test plans over his tenure with the program, not to mention his everyday work. And so you're in good hands today. Rob, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks for the introduction, Aaron. Happy to be here today. And welcome to today's workshop on tips and guidance for creating test plans that are useful for your project work, that are easy for us to review, and that set you up for success when completing your post-access test report. So as Aaron mentioned, I'm Rob Cavagnaro. I'm a mechanical engineer at PNNL, and I've been a member of the technical board since its creation. So I've both written and reviewed numerous test plans and have seen a wide range of compliance and quality. So some plans have taken as many as 3 revisions and multiple months to finalize, while others have been ready to go with minimal feedback. So ultimately, our goal as a program and technical board is to get your testing running and completed quickly while ensuring you're set up for success. The test plan is a critical document that gives us the confidence that your work will be carried out consistently with what was reviewed and approved and completed in a way that is technically sound. So today, I'll review the life cycle of a TEAMER project and put the test plan in its proper context, walk through the components of the plan and provide general or specific guidance on each section, discuss what reviewers are looking for and have been flagging in plans, summarize with some tips and tricks, and end with a Q&A session. So we do have a full hour for this workshop, though I anticipate we'll run a little bit shorter than that. So thanks for being here, and I'm looking forward to our discussion. Let's start by placing the test plan within the life cycle of a typical project. Usually, projects start with the determination that support is needed or would be beneficial for some aspect of your technology development. Now, with the goal of the work identified, applicants identify and start discussing the need with one or more facilities found through the TEAMER website with help from the program administrator, POET, or by using their professional network within the testing community. So marine energy being a relatively small technical field, many of the tests that we see in the program originate through networking. With an identified facility, applicants and facility teams complete the RFTS application where key information like objectives, methods, metrics, and roles and responsibilities are established. Applications are reviewed by the technical board on a 4-month cycle and evaluated against program criteria that are publicly accessible on the TEAMER website. I highly recommend that you read these before submitting an application. Again, knowing how your applications will be evaluated really helps you write good applications. Successful applicants are notified that they've been selected to move on to the test plan generation phase of the process. So everyone who applies receives feedback on their application. And if your application is not selected, you'll receive suggestions to improve your application if you choose to resubmit. Now, if your application is approved, your feedback will probably include some specific questions or concerns to consider or address in the test plan. Test plans are written and reviewed over a 2-month period. And then when you submit it, the plan is sent to a reviewer that's already familiar with your application. And usually this is a researcher at an institution represented on the technical board. These are usually universities or national labs that has stewarded it through the entire review process. They either send it back for revision or accept it. And we'll note that no work can be authorized to begin on your project before obtaining approval on the test plan. Then, depending on the type of facility, a contracting process or other legal agreement proceeds, as does review of any applicable permitting, which we won't be covering here today. Then technical work begins, is carried out, and concludes with the creation of a post-access report and submission of project data to an online repository. The official TEAMER test plan template, which should be used for all accepted projects, is found on the program website here. So if you want to navigate live, you can go to the TEAMER website and click on Process and Requirements. This is where you are. Oh, this is the previous date. Apologies for the rescheduling. And when you hover over that process and requirements, it pops up an overview that gives you a selection for non-open water support and open water support. Today, we're going to be covering the test plan for non-open water support, and that includes things like numerical modeling and analysis, and all the lab and bench test work, as well as expertise and the new category of commercialization. Once you navigate there, there'll be a menu here on the left side that you can click on to access the 2 templates for test plans. The 2 options that are available are the TEAMER template and the TEAMER test plan template in a Microsoft Word format, and as of recently, I think this is pretty recent, a LaTeX template that would allow you to create the document in that format if that is your preference. All right, so that's how to find the templates. Now I'm going to stop sharing the slide deck and move over to an actual test plan template. Okay. So the preamble up here and individual section headings of the template include instructions and guidance on the content that is to be included. Scroll down through the preamble, get past the title page and the executive summary. I'll note that there are different instructions for work plans, which we'll cover in section 6, involving experimental projects versus those that are performing numerical modeling or offering expertise. So projects of the expertise category may not fall neatly into the guidance or examples listed. So some discretion must be used by the authors to provide content suitable for the reviewer to determine if the work proposed meets the stated objectives. And if you have questions about expertise projects, feel free to ask later. So the first 3 sections of the test plan at the top of the document are really asking for content that was developed for the application stage of the project and really should follow very closely with what you already wrote. So the first evaluation criteria that reviewers use is a check of if the test plan is consistent with the application. And it's very important that this is the case because the program needs to ensure that the work being done is that which was reviewed and approved by the technical board. So of course, minor variations will arise as the testing scope is developed, and the applicant may have been given specific instructions on changes and improvements from the application. But if you know you're submitting a test plan with significant variation from what you submitted in the application, stop and contact POET for further guidance. This will definitely get flagged by a reviewer and require iteration or even reapplication, so starting from scratch. So discussing major changes up front will save everyone time. So for today, just for the sake of having something specific to think about, I've filled in some example content for a fake numerical modeling project of a single point moored wave energy converter. Our applicant wants to improve performance from a previous round of scaled prototype testing and has engaged P&L to model some new concepts. They're going to start by reviewing existing field results, building a baseline model, revising it with a new layout and design, running simulations of that new design, and reporting on results. So these core goals are included in the Section 1 high-level objectives. Next, in Section 2, we're asking teams to clearly define roles and responsibilities early in the test plan template, because doing this reduces the chances that conflict will arise between applicants and facilities. And trust me, that has happened. Important things to consider are defining roles for critical parts of projects like data analysis, report writing, formatting data for submission, and even things like packing up boxes at the end of the project. So for our example, it's clear that the applicant must supply results of their prior work to the facility for them to be able to do their job. They're going to be the ones who are determining the new mooring designs and conditions that they want evaluated, so the wave states, and they're going to be collaborating on reporting results. So then the facility is performing the modeling, collaborating on the reporting, and preparing data for uploading at the end of the project. Moving on to Section 3, it's asking for project objectives and metrics, and again, should be consistent with your application, though at the test plan stage, more detail should be provided. So the most important thing to pay attention to in this section is the description of metrics. So project metrics come in a couple of different flavors. The metrics that we're really looking for here in this section are those that would indicate performance against the objectives that you state, and not necessarily every parameter that you'll be measuring in your test. What I mean by that is most projects should be framing objectives around some hypothesis. For our example, the applicant's hypothesis is a new mooring layout will reduce snap loading while improving power capture performance of their WEC. Here, the stated objective would be to test this hypothesis, and a performance metric may be 0 crossings of mooring line force. If you have baseline or control results to compare to, that's really ideal. So in this case, the applicant's looking for a 50% improvement in instances of slack loading in specific wave conditions compared to an older design. I want to emphasize that including metrics of success like this is critical for both evaluating your work and for the program to evaluate the impact we're having on the industry. As a reviewer, I almost always have comments related to metrics, so put a big star next to the section and really work on making it clear. So I think this is a good place to pause and open it up for a little bit of open discussion. I want to hear some other people's suggestions for other objectives and appropriate metrics related to this example of a numerical modeling project. Any other thoughts? If they're looking to say that they have improved performance, how would they show that with metrics? What other metrics might they use?
So I guess I just wanted a little more clarity about third parties as far as doing CFD. Do you decide about who's going to perform the CFD modeling and looking it over if you accept the project?
So is that a question about how to talk about roles and responsibilities in the test plan?
I'm just curious about, there's different agencies that perform computer fluid dynamics, CFD. And I heard from one person that you seem to work with just the universities that have maybe a CFD department. And I just wanted more clarity on that, whether we can use a third party that's out in the field, or do we need to work with somebody. In our case, it would be OSU at Oregon State University.
Yeah, so the facilities that are approved in the TEAMER network to do numerical modeling, CFD being a subset of that, would be listed on the TEAMER website, or you can contact POET to get more information on which facilities may be appropriate for the type of testing you're doing. So there are a variety, actually quite a few facilities on the TEAMER network already that do offer CFD as a numerical modeling capability. So I highly encourage you to go to the TEAMER website and check it out and see if the facilities that you're interested in talking to are listed there as approved for providing that type of support.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other thoughts on performance metrics compared to, say, measured parameters? Was that clear, that distinction between the two types of metrics? All right, I guess it was. So I'm glad that that point has stuck because again, that is a very important thing for us to consider as we're reviewing your test plan. We want to make sure that your project is successful and we know if we're having an impact. Okay, so the next three sections, 4, 5, and 6, are the core of the plan, and you can think of them as the methods section of a report or paper that you would publish on this work. This means that there should be enough detail in these sections that an independent research group with similar capabilities could replicate your testing if they had access to comparable facilities, equipment, or software. So treating these sections in this way will make completion of the post-access report much easier because it pretty much translates directly to what you have to provide at the end of the project. For sections 4 and 5 on test facility and test article description, there isn't really much ambiguity here, so we're just looking for the facts. Be thorough and include pictures, drawings, or diagrams to provide enough information for a reviewer to agree that the proposed equipment, software, and expertise are appropriate for testing the article or idea at hand. So referring back to our example, I may be looking for features of a software tool or suite sufficient to resolve complex mooring arrangements coupled to a hydrodynamic model. Section 6 is the work plan and requires a significant amount of detail. So this is the most important part of the document. The template prompts are helpful, but I recommend once you've completed what is asked for, so for example, there are very specific things that we're looking for, like the description of data acquisition systems, if they're present, other things like that. What I really think is helpful is that you proceed to detail the actual plan of work using a sequential task structure. And I'm showing that in a table form here. So there are a few benefits to composing the plan in this way. The first is that it creates a linear order of operations that's easier for a reviewer and your team to follow as you're conducting your testing. Second, it then becomes convenient to refer to these tasks or steps for completing your budget and schedule. Finally, it enables very clear delineation of roles and responsibilities between applicants and facilities because for each task or subtask, you can specify who does what. From here, we're asking for a test matrix and schedule. And if you've done the sequential task ordering, the test matrix or the schedule becomes very easy to complete. And then for the test matrix, which I'm also showing as a table, for this particular case, we can have the different designs that will be evaluated in numerical modeling on one axis, and then the wave states on the other. So these are all, each individual box would show what is exactly being evaluated for this project. The next two subsections are on safety and contingency planning, and these are pretty self-explanatory, and I don't really have specific guidance on these, other than that they have to be included and they are reviewed. So many facilities have institutional safety policies, and describing how these apply to the work at hand should be sufficient. So for contingencies, we're looking for high-level thoughts and not really a detailed failure mode effects and mitigations analysis. The next subsections are really emphasizing data management, processing, and data analysis because the program has requirements regarding results dissemination. It's a big part of being a Department of Energy program. So planning for what will be shared publicly after the project ends actually starts at the application phase. And what was proposed then during the application phase needs to be detailed here in the test plan. So ultimately, projects that produce data or other useful information must submit this to MHKDR. That's WPTO's data repository for all their funded work. So taking the time to consider how data is managed, processed, and analyzed before the work begins gives the reviewer confidence that the products generated by the end of the project will be ready for upload. It's also important at this stage to consider how any existing data or information that is required for project success will be shared. Again, this goes back to roles and responsibilities. Especially important for projects that involve computational modeling or technology qualification, where the applicant will need to share potentially large volumes of existing data with the facility. Going back to our example here, the applicant would have to provide a lot of information about the design of the wave energy converter, existing models that they may have, see if existing CAD models, existing performance data, and spelling all that out in the test plan reduces any ambiguity about where the source of data are. All right, so those are all of the sections of the test plan. You'll note if you keep scrolling down here, there are additional sections that get entered in as the post-access test report. This is because both documents use the same template, test plan and post-access report, and require a lot of the same information. So if you complete your test plan in advance, thinking about how this information translates into a report on your work at the end of the day, it'll just make everything easier and faster since you won't have to do two separate documents. All right, any questions on this stage about what I've discussed about specific elements of the test plan document? So I see someone put in a question, will we have access to this template? So the template I downloaded directly from the website. So everybody has access to it. The specific sort of fake examples that I put in, I'd be happy to share these. I don't have any problem with that. But again, these are really just examples. You're welcome. Page limits. I don't believe we have any guidance on page limits on test plans. Which sections should be longer? So the ones that I emphasized, the first sections, I think being concise and clear is the emphasis there. And then you really want to be detailed in sections 5, the test analysis and article description, and then the work plan, section 6 is the most important. That's where most of the detail should be put. Can I explain more on reasons test plans have failed? Yes, absolutely. And I'll be summarizing with some tips and tricks, but in most cases, I send test plans back for lack of detail on metrics. So those performance metrics that I talked about at the beginning, lack of detail on roles and responsibilities between facilities and applicants, and lack of detail on what is actually going to be accomplished. All right, how long does a test plan review take? So test plan reviews, the target is 60 days. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, Devin or Aaron. I'm not sure if Devin is on. But it has been longer, and it really depends on how long iterations take. So let's say if I get a test plan and it requires a lot of revisions, it may take the applicant and facility a few weeks or a month to get the second version back. If I feel like my concerns or comments weren't sufficiently addressed, I'll reply back to those comments, and it could take 2 or 3 iterations back and forth. So as I mentioned, I have gone back and forth, I think a total of 3 times on one test plan, and that could take multiple months to get through. Yeah, so Devin says 60 days is a good target. 3 months after initial submission. Steve asks about if the video transcript will be available. So the video, this webinar is being recorded, so I believe it'll be available sometime after the end and will be posted somewhere. So Aaron can step in and tell everyone where it will go.
Yeah, thanks. We'll post it on our website and on our LinkedIn. And earlier in the chat, I posted where it will be under the workshops and webinars page.
Great. So I'll take one more question here, and then I'll move back into my PowerPoint presentation to continue talking about review criteria and then some summary tips and tricks. Then we'll open it back up for questions at the end. So Virag asks, do I contact the facility directly if I want to collaborate? So you don't find, and you're saying you're not finding facility contact detail. So each facility should have a contact listed at the bottom of the facility listing. If you're finding facilities that don't have contact detail, that's really good feedback for us, and we'll make sure that is fixed.
They are all available toward the bottom in a drop-down in the capabilities section. But yes, everyone does have a contact for sure. Okay.
Now I just want to talk through, just to give you a little bit of insight into what reviewers are being asked for when they evaluate your test plan. So we are provided a set of prompts, and we have to respond to them. And in addition, we provide any feedback directly on marked up versions of your submitted documents. So you'll get back your document with comments directly from the reviewer. So the test plan review criteria are, which I mentioned previously, that the test plan is consistent with the application, and the choices that we get as reviewers are, is it entirely consistent, mostly consistent, or not consistent? The second question is about the test matrix, and it asks if it's fully defined and provides sufficient detail to understand the sequence of activity, and that's just a yes or no question. This is why I emphasize completing a task table that does give a really clear sequential detail of what you're going to be doing. It asks if the test methods are reasonable for specific tests. That's also a yes or no. If the metrics are sufficient, again, going back to the importance of your performance metrics for the test, yes or no. And then ask the reviewer to provide general comments. And then the final question is about approval. And as a reviewer, we have three options. We can say, yes, the test plan is good to go as is. No, it requires minor revisions, or no, it requires major revisions. All right, so to end our talk today, I'd like to share some tips and tricks that I've compiled over the course of reviewing test plans. So the first is to stop and ask for guidance if what you're writing in the test plan deviates significantly from what was proposed in the application. The second is really that the best test plans are written collaboratively between applicants and facilities, and each has sections to contribute. I will note that facilities tend to play a bigger role than the applicant in the test plan development because they're the ones that are actually doing the work, the testing or the modeling, though this may vary depending on the type of project. So clearly defining the roles and responsibilities of each party involved early in the project will reduce conflict and make for better work in general. The next is to carefully consider project metrics related to goals and objectives of the work. And a good way to do this is to think about what success looks like for your project. If successful, what will you have achieved? How will you know that the project is successful? Those are the types of metrics that we're looking for in test plans. Then you want to structure your work plan with sequential tasks to make it easier to review and follow once you start your work. And you want to detail your data plan well enough so reviewers will have confidence that you'll be ready to upload results at the end of the project. Really important for us administering this program to close out projects with these data products being uploaded. And then if you do receive feedback on your test plan that includes comments in the margin, please do your best to resolve the issue or provide more context in the body of the document. So what I mean by that is, if we're asking for more detail, don't just provide that detail as a response to the comment in the document. Actually make changes and improvements to your document, and then as a response to the comment, you can provide more context if you want to send a message directly to the reviewer. But I have sent test plans back for revision because they answered all my questions as responses to my comments, but not actually making any changes in the document itself. And then my last bit of advice is that as reviewers, we have the option to waive our anonymity and actually engage directly with facilities and applicants about changes or improvements to test plans. So if a reviewer does waive their anonymity, take advantage of that and have a discussion, because many questions are easier to resolve in conversation rather than going back and forth asynchronously over weeks or months in Word documents. All right, so that's the end of my prepared content. Really thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to stay on and answer any more questions you have about preparation or review of test plans.
Thanks a lot for the presentation. I was just trying to, this is the first time for me. I'm just trying to understand some of the basics. So you mentioned test plan and application. Are those the same thing that we submit together, or those are two separate things?
Yeah, so those are two separate things. So the application is one of the first steps. So the way that the TEAMER program works is you find a facility, you work with a facility to decide if they're a good fit for the type of work that you're looking for, and then together you write an application. So that application is then submitted to POET, the program administrator, and 3 times a year, we review applications as a technical board, and we make decisions about which projects will move on to the test plan generation phase. So in that review process, if you are selected to move on to the test plan generation phase, that's where this process comes in. So it's a separate review to make sure that the work that you're going to be doing with a facility is what was reviewed by the technical board, and if it's technically sound to meet the objectives of your project. So it's all part of the same big TEAMER support process, but they're two different segments of it. The application comes first, and then the test plan.
So it's like a two-step process.
It is a two-step process, yes, and no work can begin until you get approval at both stages.
So the deadline Aaron mentioned early on was for the test plans, right? The June deadline and October deadline.
Those were for applications. That's the first stage.
Oh, applications. Okay.
Yes. Yep. So don't start writing a test plan. It's good to think about test plans, how you'll write test plans at the application stage, but don't start writing your test plan until you have an approved application.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, so we have a question on data management. If the TSR has proprietary data that is not intended to be released on MHKDR, should that still be ID'd and noted in the test plan? So yes, what you can do in your test plan is you can mark sections of it or highlight with material that you consider proprietary. Of course, a reviewer is still going to have to see that, but reviewers for the TEAMER program, we sign NDAs so that we're not releasing your proprietary information. Then as part of your data plan, you can specify what is going to be shared on MHKDR at the end and let's say what the period of protection for those data are. So for example, you can put a 5-year moratorium on certain aspects of what you're sharing. And if you have more specific questions about how proprietary data works for TEAMER, I'm sure the POET team will be happy to answer those. Can I provide an overview and commentary on the CRADA process, including what it entails? All right, so CRADAs are laboratory research and development agreements, and CRADAs are a little bit different depending on which organization that you're creating an agreement with. I feel like CRADAs could be maybe their own webinar, and what I'll say just in general about what they're for, it's really so that at the beginning of the project, you're establishing rules about IP generation. So who owns what IP? If you do create some during the period of performance, which each individual organization is bringing to the table. So let's say if the TSR is providing some in-kind support in terms of, they're doing their own work to build a model that the facility will then test. All that's declared in the CRADA. And then there's really a lot of legal language around how the two organizations interact, the TSR and the facility. So that's all I'm going to say about CRADAs because I'm not a contracts expert. And again, they are going to be different for each scenario at each facility that requires CRADAs. But a good suggestion for another webinar topic. So are we adverse to using AI? I don't think we've come up with any guidance on the use of AI in compilation of test plans or proposals. What I can say is I'm sure it's happening just because it's showing up everywhere. Something for the program to consider if we want to make a checkbox or something for people to declare if they have used AI tools in the preparation of applications, but I feel like personally that's not something that I'm going to be looking for. It's not a review criteria. That being said, AI isn't going to do your project. So if AI is writing your entire test plan, you still have to do that work. Well, happy to take questions after the webinar concludes. I should have put my email address somewhere in this document. But if you do have questions, feel free to email them to the POET team and I can address afterwards if you're not able to get your question answered or asked today. Right, thanks everybody for joining today. Giving me the opportunity to talk to you. Good luck on your TEAMER applications. And if you're approved for test plan generation, I think it's one of the most fun parts of doing this work is thinking about how you're going to do it, how you're going to have metrics of success. So Yeah, I look forward to seeing your applications and test plans.
Thanks, everyone. And by the way, this was recorded. We will share that as soon as it's done processing and uploaded on our workshops and webinars page, which I linked in the chat just a few questions ago. And thank you, Rob, for all the info.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody.